Thank you very much. We are here today to continue the discussion about quality indicators for assistive technology. Remember, ReadyTalk and AbleNet personnel will be addressing any technical issues that may arise. As we said earlier, this is the sixth in a series of webinars on quality indicators for AT, so we won't go into the history. But if you are new to QIAT, please go to the website after today's webinar to get more information. Again, I'm Terry Foss, and I am a special educator by certification and licensure. I have a master's in special education with emphasis in low incidence population and mild to severe special education from elementary through high school. I have experience teaching students with intellectual disabilities, autism, multiple and severe disabilities. For the last couple of decades, I have been an AT resource specialist in a Midwest suburban school district of about 28,000 students. My district's AT team consists of 2 special educators and 2 SLPs. We also have the support of 1 office member to manage the AT library. I'm also co-author with my good friend Jane Korsten of Every Move Counts Clicks and Chats Manual and the Every Move Counts Clicks and Chats Manual. Jane, please tell us about yourself because you're sitting right here by myself. I'm turning the microphone over to you.
I'm Jane Korsten. I have a degree in elementary education and a graduate degree in speech pathology and audiology. I have worked in the same school district with Terry for years. In fact, I was her SLP in one of those special ed classrooms. I worked as a speech path in the regular and special ed buildings, and then became an AT resource. Terry and I worked on the same assistive technology team. I do professional development now and was the principal investigator on an innovative research grant funded through National Institutes of Health, which is what led to Every Move Counts, and then Terry and I later revised and rewrote Every Move Counts Clicks and Chats. So as we talk today, Terry already mentioned that this is the 6th in this series of webinars. And if you have not participated in the others, as she mentioned, you can go back on the AbleNet resource link and listen to those webinars as well. We've talked about consideration, assessment, documentation in the IEP, implementation, and today we're going to talk about evaluation of effectiveness. There are 3 more webinars that will be coming for the last 3 areas: transition, professional development, and administrative support. We'd like to start by getting a little information from you with the first poll, and that poll is looking at your professional background or perspective. So if you would take a minute and indicate whether you're a speech-language path, occupational therapist, physical therapist, assistive technology, educator, parent, or administrator. And we realize that you could be an OT and be doing the assistive technology, but what is your background? You know, were you trained in assistive technology or were you trained as an occupational therapist? So if you would take a minute and indicate that right now. And we're not seeing a change.
We are seeing a lot of assistive technology specialists, but we are not seeing the change going on. Surely not everyone is AT.
They don't have a screen to choose from.
Well, Well, we're going to go on, and we're going to hope that we have a wide variety today in our audience, and we're sorry about this poll not working out quite the way we had hoped.
We're going to try a second poll. We're going to hope for a little better. We'd like to know what your experience is with the quality indicators. Are you currently familiar in using the indicators? Are you familiar with them but don't use them? Or you're not familiar with them at all? And
it looks like somehow we closed the poll too soon.
on the first one?
Yes.
All right, well, we're going to see how this goes with the second one then. You still have time. Here we go. Okay, so I'll give you another few seconds on that, but right now it looks like about half of the group is familiar but don't use QIAT. About a fourth of you do use it.
Very good.
All right, so we're going to move on. And one of the things we want to talk about initially, when we're involved in that AT process, you know, there are things that we all know happen and we think, how did this happen? And we want to look at some of those common errors that are associated with evaluation of effectiveness. You know, a lot of times we have an observable, measurable student behavior, but it isn't specified as a target for change, or that team members don't share responsibility for evaluating the effectiveness. And so we have situations where a child may be making progress in one setting and not another, but not everyone is involved in collecting that data. Sometimes we don't find a way to collect data that really works in that situation, or a schedule for program review for possible modification isn't determined before implementation begins.
And we have another poll that we'd like you to fill out, and we hope we are better managers of this poll this time. Jane, do you want to talk about this, the data?
How do you use data right now? When you're collecting data, what are you most frequently doing with it? Are you using it to document change and progress in the student's program? Do you use it to identify barriers and things that need to be changed? Do you use the data to guide the changes in strategies, implementation strategies? Do you use your data when you're recommending the AT equipment or service? And do you use data to support funding requests? So what do you find is your most dominant use of data? And it looks like a lot of use in recommending AT equipment, which is wonderful, and documenting progress.
These are great to see. A fair and equal amount between identifying barriers, changing strategies, and in order to support funding requests.
And I think those are the three that we most often forget that data can help us with.
I think especially the changing the strategies and actually documenting those barriers, Jane.
And we'll be talking about that as we go through the indicators.
Okay, I think we've really got a nice fair amount of responses, so let's go on. We are going to talk today, like we said, about evaluation of the effectiveness area. This area addresses the evaluation of effectiveness of the AT devices and services that are provided to individual students. It includes data collection, documentation, and analysis to monitor changes in student performance resulting from the implementation of AT services. That's a mouthful. Student performance is reviewed in order to identify if, when, or where modifications and revisions to implementation are needed. Evaluation of the effectiveness is about the data. What is going to be counted, observed, and measured? Data drive decisions about AT and services. Evaluation of effectiveness isn't just about collecting the data. It's about analyzing the data when using that information to make changes, if necessary, or to document what is a necessary support or service. There are 7 indicators in this area. Each indicator has a statement and is accompanied by an intent statement and a self-evaluation matrix. Number 1, team members share clearly defined responsibilities to ensure that data are collected, evaluated, and interpreted by capable and credible team members. Take a minute to read the intent statement. It's really mostly about clearly defined responsibilities. The intent is that each team member is accountable for data collection process, and those roles for data collection are assigned by the team. The effort should be led by members that are knowledgeable about the process. It really does require clearly defining the goals, determining how progress toward goals can be measured, when and where it can be measured, and by whom. Again, we're still on the first indicator, and again, it's about clearly defined responsibilities. Each indicator does have the self-evaluation matrices, and they're formatted by using a rating scale of 1 through 5, with 1 being unacceptable and 5 being promising practice. This matrix is intended to help individuals, teams, schools, and/or agencies reflect on their current status and possibly measure their own change relative to the responsibilities of data collection and interpretation. As we look at this matrix, the first column on the left, labeled number 1, describes unacceptable as the lack of a defined evaluation process. Column number 2 indicates the burden of evaluation is assigned to only one person. Number 3, some team members share in the data process. Number 4, most team members share in the process. And number 5, the most promising practice, describes a team that shares the data process consistently. We're going to go over a little case study now about a student named Patrick. Patrick is a student who requires homebound services. His team meets with him individually and in pairs depending on the demands of the service. The parent works outside the home and usually communicates with the team by speakerphone during team meetings. The psychologist on the team schedules the team meetings twice a month. Team members discuss data collection details and determine the next step for the service delivery at these meetings. Clearly defining responsibility in this situation is a real challenge when delivering services. Team members' schedules, like all team members, are extremely challenging. The effort required to collect data is a challenge too because of physical barriers and equipment management within the home setting. This education team is devoted to Patrick and makes every effort to collaborate. Team discussions involve Patrick's health concerns, the progress or lack of progress in achieving IEP goals, and in accessing the curriculum. AT for Patrick currently includes a light pressure switches located at his tongue and at his right thumb. This AT is necessary to activate school district curriculum, his communication system, and software support, or support software. Patrick's team has worked its way across this matrix, and the team now scores in the third column, but it has been a lot of work and a lot of dedication. Take a look at this form, and this form is available by download from the Resource tab on the QIAT website. It's listed under QIAT in Action. In case you can't read it clearly, and I certainly can't from my screen right now, the first step includes the PLEP for the goal, or the pleasant level of educational performance. Step 2, changes that are expected as a result of implementation. Step 3, aspects of those changes. Steps 4 and 5, discuss obstacles. Number 6, format for data collection. And 7, what is the actual data plan? Patrick's team had discussion around most of the steps on this form. This team is starting a reevaluation process right now to increase a couple of services and is in the process of determining Patrick's present level of performance and the effectiveness of current AT equipment, services, and implementation strategies. Responsibilities usually aren't determined by job title, nor is it expected that any one of the team members assume responsibility for all the tasks related to the evaluation of effectiveness. Responsibilities are clarified by this team or this team leader in order to move forward effectively and collaboratively. In this situation, the psychologist is the team leader. We're just going to look a little bit at step 7 on this form, and again, you can download it from the QIAT website. We're going to discuss the last step on the form, step 7. This is the location on the form which addresses clearly defined responsibilities. The team members responsible for data collection have been identified as the resource teacher, the PT, and the music therapist. The identified data collection system will be reviewed in 2 weeks by the full team. The data will be analyzed primarily by the AT team member, the psychologist, and the stellar OT, Kathy Fitz. The team will meet to determine what changes are to be expected as a result of increased direct service time. The team has projected changes, which include self-regulation, participation, and cooperation. This team faced some struggles with how little time there was available to work with Patrick and didn't know how all of the team's expectations were going to be met. The team designed this form to clarify roles relative to time constraints and came to the realization that there would be barriers to achieving in terms of available time. This form helped this team frame the available time, the instruction time, which totaled only 35 minutes a day, or about 19% of his school day. At the time this form was developed, Patrick was able to attend school 2 hours a day for 4 days a week. Currently, he is receiving homebound services, and the services are available for just an hour a day due to health concerns. The process of evaluation is ongoing. Okay, let's move on to indicator number 2. Data are collected on specific student achievement that has been identified by the team and is related to one or more goals. The intent statement that the targets for data collection include use of AT to progress toward IEP goals and enhance participation. Everyone on a student's team understands the reasons that AT has been chosen and the change in student performance that is expected. As an example, Patrick's goals evolve around communication, reading, and math. This screen shows you the matrix that goes along with the indicator number 2, which is specific to the data being related to one or more of the goals. Column 1, which is unacceptable, states that changes are not identified and data is not collected. Column 2, changes are identified, data are collected, but data are not related to IEP goals. Number 3, data are collected but inconsistently. Number 4, generally changes are identified and data are collected. And number 5, it's all good. Expected changes are goal-related and the data is collected consistently. Here's a glimpse of Patrick's volitional motor patterns paired with pressure-sensitive switches mounted to low-tech camera mounts wrapped in Velcro. They are positioned precisely where they need to be at Patrick's thumb and one at his tongue. Patrick controls switch scanning software on a laptop in his home while positioned in his bed to practice vocabulary. This student has a work ethic that is solid and impressive, and he is an active member of his own IEP team when deciding what AT works best. Thankfully, his OT is tireless and creative when it comes to innovative access systems.
And now as we move to the third indicator, that evaluation of effectiveness includes the quantitative and qualitative measures of change in the student's performance and achievement. If we talk about those two, qualitative and quantitative, quantitative data refers to the actions, behaviors, student responses, etc., that can be measured and counted. In the case of AT use, it might include factors like speed, accuracy, latency, task completion, duration, how long the child can engage in the task, and it's gathered by observing and counting specific actions, products, or movements. When we talk about qualitative data, and Terry just mentioned that Patrick participates in his meetings, his IEP process, and lets them know what he likes. That is the qualitative piece, subjective information. It can be observed, but it's difficult to count it. It might include descriptions of what took place or the student's stated opinion of a preference or feeling, and it's gathered through interviews, anecdotal notes, and measurement through rubrics or observations. Qualitative data can be quite challenging if there's nothing to support that qualitative data. How often have we sat with a student and one person says, I think he's doing better, and another disagrees? So that's the challenge in talking from anecdotal, is getting the agreement. If you look at the intent statement, that changes targeted are observable and measurable so that the data can be as objective as possible. The indicator says quality and quantity are important, but we need to have both. So looking at might be accomplishment of relevant tasks, how assistive technology is used, the student's preferences, productivity, participation, independence, quality of work, speed and accuracy of performance, and the student satisfaction. To look at an example, if we have a student that's doing some kind of modified computer access, it might be Patrick, and someone says he's doing a lot better, he's doing a lot better. And someone else says he now can do so many words per minute when before he could only do so many words. We've taken something that was qualitative and made it a quantitative measure. In looking at the matrix to go with that indicator, what we find is that, to begin with, the unacceptable is that we aren't evaluating the effectiveness at all, or that we're evaluating something other than the student performance. Everybody thinks he's doing better. 3, we're evaluating on subjective information about student performance. Oh yes, he's getting a lot better, a lot better. And on the 4th, approaching promising practices, we're evaluating based on objective information about student performance, but just from a few data sources. When he's in the resource room, he's able to type so many words per minute. Most promising practice, we're looking at evaluating the effectiveness consistently based on objective information about student performance obtained from a variety of sources. So as we're looking at that, it is important to know what the student likes, but it's also important to have that objective data. We had a student who requested a modified computer access and wanted to try Morse code. He was able to learn Morse code and wanted to use it in school, but when we presented him with the objective data, which was the comparison of how many words a minute he could type using his other system, as opposed to the Morse code, we found that even though he'd gotten quite fast at Morse code, he was still faster using his other selection method, and he chose to use that method from then on. Charlie's team decided that he was a good candidate for speech recognition software, and after the initial training, he would use voice recognition software in the resource room for assignments longer than 2 paragraphs. He would also continue to dictate to a designated staff person in selected classes. And during that 6-week training period, his special ed teacher and parents agreed to collect data on accuracy, time on task, and the number of words he dictated. What he likes best is important. How he feels about that is important. And so they're collecting both kinds of information, and like with the other students, he can make his decision about what he feels is the best system for him under different conditions. When we look at the 4th indicator, we're looking at evaluating effectiveness across environments during both natural and structured activities. And the idea is that tasks within each environment need to be identified. The technology may have a different goal in different settings, and so data needed and procedures for collecting those data in each environment need to be determined. If we talk about how that looks when we're evaluating, doing a self-evaluation, we find that what's unacceptable is that we're not evaluating in any environment. But as we move to the right, we find first evaluating during structured activities in certain environments, and that always to me makes me think of the therapy when we do pull-out therapy and we're collecting our data in that mass trial format. But as we move to the right, what we find is that even though we're still evaluating during structured activities, we've added a few naturally occurring opportunities. So it's one thing what that child does with a communication device in a therapy setting, but now when he goes to snack or goes to an activity where it's an opportunity to use it, how is he doing? The fourth, continuing to the right, is that it's being evaluated during natural opportunities and structured in multiple environments. And as we hit the fifth, we are consistently evaluating during those natural opportunities and structured activities in many environments. In looking at the, excuse me.
And Jane, I see that we have a question, and it's when looking under the resource tab on QIAT site, I'm not finding the document. You know, maybe it's under a different tab, and it may possibly be under guiding documents. I know that it is under a header that says QIAT in action. So if you could look there, it's a little difficult for me to look at that up right now, but you know, just go ahead and peruse the website, and I know it's there. And it is listed as Plan for Effectiveness of AT Use. Okay, let's go on and look at indicator number 5. Data are collected to provide teams with a means for analyzing student achievement and identifying supports and barriers that influence assistive technology used to determine what changes, if any, are needed. The primary focus here is on analyzing student achievement and identifying supports and barriers. Looking at the intent statement, this statement expands on the data analysis to include multiple factors which may influence success or errors. Student and staff expectations, barriers, opportunities to practice skills, as well as skills of same-age peers may need to be analyzed. When adequate progress is occurring, data will help identify essential supports for continued student achievement. In the absence of adequate progress, data can identify factors to suggest program adjustments. Okay, let's look at the indicators, the matrix for indicator 5. And remember, indicator 5 really addresses analyzing student achievement and identifying supports and barriers with data. Column 1, which is unacceptable, suggests practice indicates no data are being collected. Column 2, data are collected but not analyzed. Love those yellow sheets with the hash marks on it, and then nobody counts up the hash marks, Jane. Number 3, data are superficially analyzed. Number 4, data are analyzed most of the time, which is probably where a lot of us reside. And number 5, the data is collected and analyzed all the time. Data provide documentation for any supports necessary, and this may translate to purchases of equipment, curriculum, provision of service, and/or environmental arrangements. Let's look at Patrick again in that mysterious form. It looks like it was found. It is under guiding documents. Thank you very much, Mary Jo, for reporting that in for me. Okay, back to the form. This time I'm going to address step 4, which the question is, what obstacles may inhibit success? In Patrick's case, the team projects, through prior experience with Patrick, that physical access, opportunity, instruction and practice, personal preference, attitude, and duration may present as barriers. Through measuring his response to intervention, which is currently more direct service, the team will be able to determine what supports are needed to reduce the barriers, which may well be self-regulation. Physical access supports may require adjustments in physical positioning and our AT. Opportunities are dictated by time constraints, and the goal may need to be adjusted accordingly. Like anyone, Patrick's preferences change across days, lengths of sessions, service providers, activities, attitudes, and health concerns. It's an ongoing process. Have I said that already?
Looking at indicator 6, we find that the key words are that we make changes. Changes are made in the AT, the student's AT services and program, when the data indicate that such changes are needed to improve student achievement. We have some flexibility in the provision of services, and we need, in order to support student progress, we need to be able to make the changes when they need to be made. To be responsive to changes in student performance, such as a change in the student's need or achievement, environment, or tasks. Evaluation of effectiveness data are collected in an ongoing manner, and that ongoing and analyzing are critical, but if we don't change in response to that information, then we have blamed the child for their lack of progress. There's a saying, lo, though I go through the valley of litigation, I know no fear, for I'm armed with the best data in the valley. It's nice to have that paper with those hash marks, but if we aren't analyzing it so that we can make changes when the student fails to progress, then we're blaming the child for his lack of progress. If we look at the innovation matrix, the self-evaluation matrix, we find that program changes are never made. And how often have we all sat in an IEP where the report is that the student didn't meet his goals and the strategies for implementation didn't change in the entire year, even though there was no progress being shown. Next is that we make changes, but it's in the absence of data. We don't think he's doing very well, so we're going to change it this way. The third rating is that program changes are loosely linked to student performance and data. Well, he's not typing as well as we thought because it shows he's not improving how many words a minute. However, we're thinking maybe we need to put him in a different chair or we need to give him a different topic. It's not analyzing the data to see what those barriers might be. That program changes are linked to student performance data, so we're looking at that data and it tells us not only that he's not progressing as well as we thought, but we can tell from our data that he seems to do better when he's in this position, or he seems to do better when he's with a particular person, or when the task is particularly motivating. And so what we know then is that we need to make changes linked to those areas where we see he does better. And most promising practice is looking at student performance data and consistently making the changes in the program that allow the child to continue to progress. If we go back and look at Charlie again, what we find is the voice recognition worked in the resource room and at home, but not in noisy electives. So perhaps a scribe is the answer in those situations where it's too noisy to use voice recognition. In the absence of sufficient progress, the team analyzes the data to decide what changes need to be made in the student's program. Those changes may include adjustments to AT services, AT tools, or both. Analyzing data helps to pinpoint specific training or supports the student needs in order to support adequate progress in relationship to the predetermined criteria. When the team analyzes the student performance, team members can make necessary adjustments and avoid making errors such as assuming the student has skills that are not present, assuming the student does not have skills that actually are mastered, or prematurely abandoning the AT tool. Some changes in student performance may result in a need for the IEP team to be reconvened to adjust the IEP goals. The seventh one A seventh indicator is that evaluation of effectiveness is a dynamic and ongoing process and that it is reviewed periodically. In some instances, the original data collection strategies planned by the team may not provide the information they needed. When creating and or modifying the plan for evaluation of effectiveness, the team addresses the desired student outcomes as well as current skills in observation and data review of the staff. In developing the original evaluation plan, the team also determines the circumstances that will trigger the need to re-examine or initiate new data collection activities. We have a question. Is there a webinar on how to most effectively collect data? Well, maybe that's something we need to look at. There is not currently one
That we know about.
that we know of. That is a topic for professional development opportunities, and so perhaps we need to visit about that. Thank you for bringing that up. When we're looking at the evaluation matrices for the ongoing process, the first and unacceptable is that we don't even use a process to evaluate effectiveness. And then we look to the right, and the next step is we do, but we only do it annually. We're not making program changes based on the data. As we continue to move to the right, we find that it only takes place annually, but the team does use it to make those changes annually, which means that for that year in between, that student was not progressing, but changes were not made. When we look at rating 4, they're evaluating the effectiveness in an ongoing way, and they generally use the data to make program changes. Most promising practice comes to taking the data on an ongoing basis and then consistently using that data to drive the changes in the student's program.
Okay, we have another poll. This time, we'd like you to fill out the survey to indicate your next priority in terms of evaluating effectiveness from this point forward. Is it clearly defining roles and responsibilities of team members when it comes to data collection and analysis? Is it collecting data that is student achievement specific and that is related to one or more goals? Is data analyzed? Is it making team decisions regarding changes that are data driven? Let's see how that is going. Wow. Looks like we need to make changes in response to data. Interesting.
And it's the two that seem to be the targeted as the biggest needs are the two I think we all struggle with the most. We make a goal, and the goal might be that the child will communicate, in a particular activity, and then what we start collecting data on is what messages he's hitting or, with whom he's communicating, and we forget that what our general goal was. And the making changes in response to data, I think, is the most challenging thing, because if the systems we select for evaluating don't give us a way to gather data about the barriers as well, then we don't have the information that we need in order to make the changes. As we're looking at setting up the data and the team is sitting and having discussion, part of that discussion really needs to be, our goal is for him to communicate more often. What do we think will stop him from doing that? And the obvious one is he doesn't have his communication system with him, and I have been called in settings where the child wasn't using his device and observation showed that the device was not available to him. Or he has favorite people with whom he will interact, and if we only collect the data during the time he's with non-preferred people, then the data might not show the progress. And so stopping and looking to see exactly what are the barriers ahead of time so that as we design our data collection system, we have a way to go back and look and be sure that those are not the things that are happening. And if they are, then those are the changes we make. If you've participated in the other webinars regarding the QIAT indicators, you may have noticed that there are some things that seem to be related. And in fact, the quality indicators are very tightly woven. There are things that affect other areas. So just to call your attention to a few of the indicators that come back and relate to evaluation of effectiveness. If you participated in the consideration webinar, or if you've looked at that online, what you'll notice is that indicator 5 under consideration says that the team gathers and analyzes data about the student, customary environments, educational goals, and tasks when considering a student need for AT devices and services. When we sit and look in the IEP meeting and we just check the box that we've considered, and we haven't collected data that tells us what did we consider and what kinds of data have we gathered about that student in the environment where that consideration is being discussed, then we haven't really done an accurate or adequate job of consideration. The next one that's interrelated is assessment. How can we do an assessment without collecting data? So indicator 5, recommendations from assistive technology assessments are based on data about the student environments and tasks. Terry mentioned earlier having that present level of educational performance, that PLEP, and having that data about what the student does before we ever put the tool in place should be part of our assessment. To say, well, he doesn't complete his written work in time, or he doesn't communicate often enough, doesn't give us the scaffolding we need to develop a meaningful goal and then to collect data that's relevant to that meaningful goal. So if in doing the process of assessment we can say that he's able to produce so many characters per minute, then when we put the AT tool and services in place, we can look to see whether those are expanding, whether those numbers are increasing. Another place that they are interrelated is the IEP, including AT in the IEP. Indicator number 4, IEP content regarding assistive technology use is written in language that describes how assistive technology contributes to achievement of measurable and observable outcomes. And again, if we don't develop a way that we know what our measurable and observable outcomes would be, if we haven't quantified that and how we'll collect it, we're at risk for coming up with meaningful systems for collecting meaningful data. And the last one, and you might in reading these find that there are others that tangentially do deal with data, but these are ones that are just really right there. Indicator number 6 under implementation, that assistive technology implementation is initially based on the assessment data, and we just talked about that with assessment, and is adjusted based on performance data. And implementation and evaluation of effectiveness go hand in hand. You really can't develop an effective implementation plan if you don't have embedded clearly the goals and how you're going to measure the progress towards those goals. So those are all just different indicators that might be particularly related to data collection.
Okay, the screen we're looking at now refers you to the Quality Indicators homepage. And on this page, this is just a screenshot of the homepage, and I'd like to remind participants to go to the QIAT website for further information. And if you look on here, I know there was a request about where to find the form that we were referring to earlier in this.
No, it's the evaluation of effectiveness form. And so there are documents that relate particularly to evaluation of effectiveness on the QIAT resources.
Mm-hmm. It's on the QIAT resources, and it might possibly be along there with guiding documents. And I know it's under a blue header of QIAT in Action. And you can see from this screenshot that you can see the QIAT leadership email to contact us for more information, and the QIAT website address is at the bottom of all of the slides. Okay, this is a screenshot of the resources page. And in this screenshot, in this screen, there's a wealth of information and so much more than what you might find on some of the other tabs in terms of contributions that have been made from the QIAT website. And the SERV has how many individuals on it now?
Over 3,000.
Over 3,000. And I encourage you to take part in that listserv. It's a wealth of information. And resources on this page came from many contributors through there. When you go to this resource page, you'll see the introduction. You'll see the table in the lower part of the screen, and that's where contributions have been posted. And then when you look to the right of the page, the right side of the page, you'll see links to take you through the process of submitting documents and resources that are obviously helpful to other individuals.
And there's a question, we're going to talk about questions in a minute, but Joan was talking about it's important that new technologies, especially what's coming out right now, there's so many new things, may make AT currently employed obsolete and worth changing, even if that new technology is not fully understood. And the example that she gave was that the iPad was a game changer for communication, speech generation, and so forth. I think it's important to realize that the quality indicators are about process, not product. And so those strategies that we're talking about in the process, and since we're talking about evaluation of effectiveness, the process of doing that would be the same regardless of what the tool is. I think it is important to explore the changing technology all of the time. Not that we have to take away something that's working for a child because something new and better came out, but at some point that old technology breaks down and we have the information about the features a child needs in order to make a selection from the new technology, put it in place, and if we've done a good job of collecting our data, we can look and say, what we know he could do with this old equipment, which had these features, is, and now we want to introduce this new technology, and we know what we're shooting for. We have an idea of what he's able to do, and he may actually be able to do it better, more efficiently, more quickly using the new technology. So the importance of the data is always there, evaluating what you're using so that you have a framework for comparing anything new. The next thing
I was just going to say, thank you, Lisa. Lisa wrote in and said the form we've all been looking for is under the resources home page. And I think you scroll down to the lower part of the page to find it. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that.
And so there's examples of evaluation of effectiveness resources from the QIAT website, and when you go on, you can find, these are just a few that we've pulled up, the guiding document. And so as we have discussed the indicators, the guiding document gives you a little more information in each of those areas. We're giving you that nutshell highlight, but the guiding document for evaluation of effectiveness will connect that with text and examples. There is the plan for evaluation of effectiveness of AT use. Gail Bowser's Hey, Can I Try That?, which is something that we do with the student by interview, or the student fills it out by themselves, and that gives them an opportunity to give their input about things they like, feel comfortable with, helps us identify features and know what we're looking for in the technology. How do you know it? How do you show it? Which looks at a broad range of assistive technology options and different ways that we might measure those. The ABCs of effectively evaluating AT use. Every move counts, and every move counts clicks and chats has inherent within it systems for collecting data regarding voice output, switch use, and no-tech, low-tech communication systems. And the Assistive Technology Implementation and Evaluation Planning Guide. So when you go to the website, as Terry was talking about, that is a place where you can find these tools, and things are being posted on that website through the list all of the time. People will write in with a concern about how to measure something, and someone will share a system that they have used before. So do we have any questions? Kendra, in private practice setting, has there been any adaptation of QIAT teams and therapists outside of the school setting? I work outside of the school system as well, and I find that, in fact, right now I'm working with a student who is also in the school system, and being able to have a conversation, because how we evaluate the effectiveness for that child, how we do it, may look different between the home setting and the school setting in terms of what we collect, but we're clear on the goal. And so when we come together to talk about the goal, we're able to say, this is what's happening in that school setting, and we can compare it to what's happening in the home setting. So I think historically we've had a tendency to be rather adversarial in those situations, but what we really are doing is working on the same things in different settings. And when we look at that, we can come back to those indicators, and I've found that they give us a good common ground for discussing, as long as we understand that the content that fills in will look very different depending on those two settings. I think it's incumbent on each one of us in looking at private practice and interfacing with the schools. I've worked with adults in assisted living, so it was not the schools that we were looking, but the home setting or the work setting. And again, coming back to what will that look like for them in that setting. If we look at the process that QIAT gives us and we look at how we modify it for the setting, I found it to be very useful. The concept of quality indicators, and I'm reading Carol's comment, are so powerful. Any idea about how many school districts are actually using the indicators? Been in places where folks were involved in QIAT, but there's no evidence that the indicators are used in their schools. And if people who are already devotees are not using the indicators, where do we go from there? You know, yes, isn't that frustrating? And it is being used in many school districts, and there are several states that have adopted it as part of their statewide. It is being used internationally. There are some schools in England that are adapting it for their use, and I think the important thing is that realizing that there might need to be some changes. And I know that for Terry and me, as we were working with the development of the indicators, our school district was reluctant to do that self-evaluation. It is sometimes pulling hen's teeth to get people to look at those indicators. But once we start realizing how well it supports recommendations, we never in our district made recommendations that we couldn't provide data to support the recommendations, and we were not denied purchase of equipment because we had data to show the impact for the student. And so as we started using it from the bottom up, it became more understood by everyone. In some settings, it comes from the top down, that administration finds those indicators and passes that on to staff. And I think it is, again, a process working through that to provide the better quality for students.
Okay, we're going to move to the last few slides, and if you do have a question, be sure and type it into the chat box now. The next QIAT webinar in the AbleNet University Series is AT Transition, March 19th, 2014. It's at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, and the presenters will be Gail Bowser and Diana Carl.
And I was going back up to look. Gloria mentioned there were some questions towards the top, and we're
looking at the questions now.
We're looking to see if we have missed any of your questions. And so if you have a question that was unanswered, if you would type it back in right now, because we're looking through that browser and there have been so many comments, it's difficult for us to see.
We are still looking for some questions. We're scrolling through a number of comments. Please be patient with us.
If you have a burning question, type it in again now. Repeat one more time where to find the document under Resources. And
I'm going to pull it up. I'm just going to take a second and go to the QIAT website to do that.
And so under Resources.
Maybe not.
One thing I will say while Terry's looking for it, and we use this a lot, and so you would think we would just be able to jump right to it, but one thing, not all that wander are lost. I often find when I go in looking for something that I find a gem I didn't even realize was there. So I think surfing this site can be helpful.
Okay, it is on the Resource tab, and you have to scroll down. If you're at the home page, then you click on the Resource tab, and you have to scroll down, and you'll see a big heading, Guiding Documents. Scroll past that. Then you'll see a big heading, QIAT in Action, and scroll down, and it is number 3. It is called Plan for Evaluation of Effectiveness of AT Use.
And what is AT transition?
The next webinar.
The next webinar. And it is discussing the quality indicators for transitioning assistive technology devices and services from one setting to another. And that could be from one grade to another. It can be from one school to another. There is also a group working on post-secondary transition, and they have developed indicators for that. And yes, we are using a team to mean the IEP team, which also includes family and the student. So we are at the end of our time. Thank you so much for joining us. We feel pretty passionate about what we're able to do for students. And one of the things that the Quality Indicators does is gives us a common ground for discussion across agencies, across settings, classrooms, personnel. It gives us a vocabulary and a way to share what our intent is.